Are the Buccaneers the biggest threat to the Eagles in the NFC? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. PFF dropped their quarterback rankings for the season as well as their top 30 over 30. More on that in a little bit, but let's start this show off with some interesting comments from Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football, where the crew over there were listing the biggest threats to the Eagles in the NFC. Brandt had the Rams at 3, the Lions at 2, then at number 1, he had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kyle Brandt said, quote, "At number 1, this might be a surprise, but it shouldn't be. Number 1, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are under the radar, and Sarah, you know this. They smacked the Eagles last year. Look it up. They smacked them. They kept Saquon in check. Baker went absolutely nuts. They also knocked the Eagles out of the playoffs the year before. Also, Nick Sirianni lost to them a few years back when it was a different iteration of the Buccaneers. Eagles fans know that the Bucs always play them very tough. Maybe they're not the brightest, shiniest team in the league, and they don't have the exposure that maybe the Commanders had last year, and I don't have the Commanders on my list, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been a nemesis for this version of the Eagles, and I have them as the number 1 team the Eagles don't want to see at the end of the season," end quote. I know we spend a lot of time on this show talking about how the Bucs can be overlooked by the national media, how some of their players don't get anywhere close to the kind of praise and appreciation that they deserve. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up later. But Kyle Brandt always gives the Bucs their flowers when he has the opportunity, and when it comes to naming them as the number 1 team that could be a threat to the Eagles, not only is he giving them the recognition they deserve, but also putting them in a spotlight saying, hey, you guys aren't talking about this team enough, and I'm going to put my name on it 4 months before the season even starts, that this is a team to watch for. Jalen Hurts for his career is 1-2 against the Bucs. He has a quarterback rating of 71.5. He has 550 passing yards to go with 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's been sacked 9 times, which is the most by any team that isn't in the NFC East. His 3 interceptions are the most, tied with the Packers, against any team that isn't in the NFC East. His 3.29 yards per carry against the Bucs is the 4th lowest against any team not in the NFC East. Hurts is 6-1 against NFC South teams that aren't the Bucs. There's just something about this Bucs team, about this Todd Bowles defense, that Hurts just cannot seem to be able to figure out. Now, of course, there are teams that the Bucs don't ever seem to match up well against. The Rams certainly come to mind right out of the gate, but for quite a while there, the Bucs didn't match up well with the Eagles either. You know, up until that NFC Championship when Rondé housed an interception, they finally got the monkey off their back in that one, and since then, they've been able to beat the Eagles pretty regularly. Nick Sirianni became the head coach of the Eagles in 2021 and has faced the Bucs 5 times. The Eagles are 1-4 in those games. They won in week 3 of the 2023 season, 25-11, then saw the Bucs later in the playoffs, and we all know how that went. The Bucs blew their doors off 32-9. So the only time that Sirianni has been able to get his guys a win was the 3rd game of a season where you had a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator who was calling plays for the first time in his career. In Sirianni's tenure, the Bucs have outscored the Eagles 135-87. So, like Kyle said, it may come as a surprise, but it shouldn't. If I were the Eagles, the absolute last team I would want to see in the postseason is the Bucs. It doesn't matter where it is. The last 4 games that these two have played have been in Tampa, and this season is going to make it 5 straight. But the Eagles lost their 1 home game to the Bucs under Sirianni, and they've lost 3 of their last 4 to the Bucs in Philly. So if these two teams match up with one another come January, it's going to be a serious concern as to whether or not they can actually get past Tampa. What's crazy is with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, if the Eagles get out of the wild card round, they go to the Super Bowl. They are undefeated in the divisional and conference championship rounds with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. They could even create, a little bit of false confidence. If these two face off outside of the wild card round and say, hey, we've gotten past the first round. We get past the first round, we're going to the Super Bowl. That's how it always goes. But I would say both of these teams end up winning their division. So the earliest that they would play is that divisional round. But that's what makes the week 4 game between these two teams that much more important. That game could be the difference between playing in Tampa and playing in Philly. And I know I just said it doesn't matter where the game is because the Bucs have been winning in Philly, but I would much rather this game be played in Tampa in the warmer weather in front of Bucs fans than in the cold and snow in Philly in front of those awful, terrible fans there in Philadelphia. All that said, it's not just the Eagles that the Bucs need to worry about. They have to be able to take care of their own business against the NFC South in the rest of their schedule in order to set themselves up for a chance to be the ones to knock the defending champs off their pedestal. The Bucs have plenty of other teams on their schedule that are playoff caliber and can ruin Tampa's quest to make a run for another Lombardi. So while I appreciate Kyle Brandt going on Good Morning Football and singing the Bucs praises and basically saying, hey, this is a team that you all need to pay attention to, and they are the top of my list of teams that can knock Philly off the mountaintop, the Bucs have their own demons that they need to exercise this season. The Rams, the Niners, primetime games, getting back to having the upper hand against the Atlanta Falcons. All these things are going to add up and be crucial to any success that they have this season. So while I would love for the Bucs to slap the Eagles around and beat them by 20 again when they face off in week 4, and while that game is very important and will likely have some playoff seeding implications, the season is so much more than just that one game, and the Bucs aren't going to get a breather all year long. They have to play with a playoff mentality all season because every game will be crucial. You can't afford with this schedule to lose any games that you shouldn't, and you still also have to find a way to steal a game or two that you probably should not win. That's what the year is going to boil down to by the time all is said and done. If you can get through that gauntlet of the Eagles, Seahawks, Niners, and Lions at 500 or above, and then get through the gauntlet of the Bills, Rams, Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Dolphins, Panthers, you can go 4-0 against the division and at least 500 in the other games, then you're going to be sitting real pretty for the postseason and likely have that confidence that this team needs to say that, hey, we can now make a run to Levi's Stadium in San Francisco for Super Bowl 60. But the week 4 game against the Eagles is not the end all be all. However, it is going to be crucial when it comes time for those January matchups to be set. And if I'm the Eagles, I am praying, absolutely praying that the Falcons or the Panthers step up and knock the Bucs off their own mountaintop within the division so that they don't have to deal with them when it matters the most. PFF is doing dumb things. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, for me, all the fees that rack up with youth sports, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan your long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So John Costco of PFF put together the full quarterback rankings heading in to the 2025 season, broken into tiers. At the top, there's the elite tier with Patrick Mahomes at 1, Burrow at 2, Lamar at 3, Allen at 4. Then tier 2 is what he called high-end starters with Hurts at 5, Jaden Daniels at 6, Stafford at 7, Justin Herbert at 8. Then tier 3A, as he puts it, are starters who have flashed high-end play. You have Goff at 9, Geno Smith at 10, Brock Purdy at 11. Then tier B or tier 3B, which are solid starters, but they need more help. You have Jordan Love at 12 and Baker Mayfield at 13. Costco says, quote, Mayfield has pulled off a remarkable career turnaround. After bouncing back in 2023, he delivered the best season of his career in 2024, earning an 85.9 overall grade. He'll now be working with his third offensive coordinator in 3 years in Tampa Bay and his fifth since 2022. But the struggles of the 2021-2022 feel firmly in the rear view mirror. His 2024 campaign also featured one of the wildest plays of the season, completing a pass with one of the league's top pass rushers draped all over him. End quote. Okay, let's talk about this abomination for a minute. First, the elite guys and having Mahomes at 1. I get it. He's still Mahomes, but he has dropped off over the last few years, and I would take any of the other quarterbacks in that tier over him today. Then, can someone please explain to me why Justin Herbert is still being gushed over? What has he done? What has he done so far in his career that makes him so beloved and so praised and put up amongst the best quarterbacks in the NFL? I'm not saying he's bad, but come on. He had an incredible touchdown to interception ratio, but he had fewer than 4,000 passing yards, and he only had 23 touchdowns. His 2021 was great. 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns. But he hasn't had more than 25 touchdowns in a season in the last 3 years, while his passing yards have continued to drop. Then he has 2 playoff appearances, 2 losses with a 1-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Why do people hoist him up among the best quarterbacks that the league has to offer? I don't understand it. Stafford is still decent if he isn't hurt, but his career has been on the decline for the last couple of seasons. And then this is the one that really got me. You have Geno Smith at 10. Geno Smith, the guy that threw for just over 4,300 yards and 21 touchdowns with 15 interceptions. That's 1 fewer interception than Baker had with half the touchdowns. And then he just got traded away from a team where he had DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Tyler Lockett. And he gets traded to the Raiders where who is his top receiver? Who? Jacoby Myers? Jack Beck? Like, I understand he's got Brock Bowers, but who is his top wide receiver? Like, what are we talking about here? How on earth can you possibly justify putting Geno Smith in the top 10 over Baker Mayfield. I mean, shoot, for that matter, how can you put him over Jordan Love? That's insane. I like Geno Smith, but to say he's a top 10 quarterback heading into the 2025 season is absolute, unmitigated stupidity. And as much as I like Jaden Daniels, it's a little early to have him at number 6. It's been one season. While he's exciting and he's fun to watch, he's clutch. He turned an entire franchise around side by side with Dan Quinn. But isn't this what everyone was saying about CJ Stroud after his rookie season? Then look at the massive step back that he took. I think Daniels is one of the best and brightest future stars of this league, but it's a little early to put him in the second tier of quarterbacks in the NFL after just 1 year. And look, I'm not sitting here saying that Baker should be in the top 5, but to have him outside of the top 10 behind guys like Herbert and Geno and Stafford, you could even make the argument that he shouldn't be behind Brock Purdy. But I'm going to let that one go, considering Purdy has already played in a Super Bowl. And whether or not you believe that he's a system quarterback, he runs that system with incredible efficiency. So I'm not going to nitpick that one. But come on. Stop crapping on what Baker Mayfield has been able to do in Tampa since everyone and their brother declared his career dead in 2022. Back-to-back years of career highs in yards and touchdowns. Back-to-back years of Pro Bowls. Back-to-back years of career highs in completion percentage. The dude just became the second quarterback in NFL history with at least 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns, and a completion percentage over 70. And he did it without his top 2 receivers for a month and one of his top receivers for more than half of the season. He did it with his second offensive coordinator in as many years. He did it after guys like Costco and all these other experts and pundits and analysts declared his career over because of the mess in Carolina and a bogus exit from Cleveland, which they are still regretting to this day. Quite frankly, it's a joke. And what more help does he need? You put him in a tier that was labeled solid starter, but they need more help. What are you talking about? The Bucs have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They have the best receiving room in the NFL, and I will die on that hill, and I challenge everyone to come at me with a different take than that, because top to bottom, the Bucs wide receiver room is the deepest and most talented in the NFL. They have one of the best young running backs in the NFL. What more help does he need? He's got a golden corral buffet of options to get the ball to. The only help that he needs is for the defense to not crap their pants and actually get stops so the team can win more games and it's not put all on him in the final 2 minutes of a game. So put this ranking in your back pocket, bookmark it, save this episode, put a reminder in your calendar for the beginning of 2026 to come back and revisit this so that we can be reminded that Baker was put behind those quarterbacks for this season, that he was once again disrespected, overlooked, and underestimated. Because it's just a running theme that happens year after year after year, no matter what Baker does to prove these guys wrong. No matter what he does to prove that he is up there in terms of his production with the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And Baker, if you're listening to this, go ahead, print this ranking out. Save this clip to your phone. Hang the list in your locker, because these clowns, they don't get it. They still don't get it. And at this point, they never will get it. They don't know who they're dealing with. And that's the chip that sits on Baker's shoulder that drives him to be the quarterback that he has been for the Buccaneers the last 2 years. PFF did have a little redemption, though. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Memorial Day episode of Locked On Bucs. And if I'm going to come on here and I'm going to knock one of PFF's writers for saying stupid, asinine things and having verifiably bad opinions, then I will also turn around and mention a PFF writer for being smart, because I am an equal opportunity criticizer and praiser on this show. So Dalton Wasserman put together his list of the top 30 players over 30 heading into the 2025 season, where Derrick Henry comes in at number 1, and that should be no surprise. Henry was incredible last season in Baltimore, and he shows no signs of slowing down. And I think people genuinely overlooked how amazing Derrick Henry really was last year, because Saquon was even more impressive. When you had two high caliber, big name running backs that changed teams in the same offseason, though the one that didn't perform as well is going to get overlooked. But Derrick Henry was unreal in Baltimore. It makes Baltimore an incredibly scary team. But, I no qualms whatsoever about Derrick Henry being number 1. Then you have guys like TJ Watt, George Kittle, Chris Jones, and Lane Johnson rounding out the top 5. But coming in at number 10 is Buccaneers receiver Mike Evans. Wasserman said, quote, Evans recorded his 11th straight 1,000-yard season in 2024 and looked sharp as ever doing it. Despite dealing with injuries, he posted a 90.2 receiving grade, the second highest of his career, and tied with Amon-Ra St. Brown for 4th among qualified wide receivers, end quote. First, it's worth noting that Evans may have been the 10th player on this list, but he is the number 1 receiver on this list. Now, Evans is finally, after all these years, starting to gain the attention and notoriety that he's earned over his 11 seasons, and he's looking to do something that no receiver in the history of this game has ever done, and that, of course, is get 1,000 yards receiving for a 12th consecutive year. It's going to be a little tougher this time around with the emergence of Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving, plus the return of Chris Godwin and the additions of Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson. But Evans still hit his 1,000-yard marks when he was surrounded by Godwin, of course, but Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette, Julio Jones was in there for a little bit. So it's not as if he hasn't been surrounded by loads and loads of talent before. We know one thing is for sure. That record means as much to Baker as it does to Mike. And Baker is going to make sure that Evans gets that record this year. You can go back to last year where he was talking about how close it was for Evans to get his 1,000 yards last year, despite the fact that Evans did miss a month. And Baker said, I can't be the quarterback that ends this streak, because then Mike is going to have to play for another 12 years after this. So that record means the world to Mike Evans, but it means just as much to Baker Mayfield, because Mike is his guy. He wants to make sure that Mike is able to set history, and Mike can't do that without Baker. Speaking of Baker, he comes in at number 25 on this list. He's also the top quarterback, coming in 1 spot ahead of Geno Smith and 5 spots ahead of Matthew Stafford, because Wasserman is smart. Wasserman says, quote, Mayfield closed out his 20s with the best season of his career. His 85.9 PFF grade in 2024 ranked 6th among quarterbacks, and he finished top 5 in yards per attempt, passing touchdowns, and adjusted completion percentage. With a strong supporting cast in Tampa Bay, he's set up well for continued success in 2025, end quote. I just went over all the things I could about Baker, but I think we're in store for another record-breaking season from him. I truly, truly do. I think he can surpass the 4,500 yards from last year and the 41 touchdowns, and he can do this for a second straight season. I just want to see the interceptions drop from the 16 he had last year. That number has to come down. And I mean, let's take a look at this, take a step back and say a 41 to 16 touchdown to interception ratio is not bad by any means at all. I mean, you are talking about having more touchdowns than interceptions, being, sitting there at 25. That's more than some quarterbacks had total last year. So, it's not terrible, but those interceptions come in bunches for Baker. And when your defense isn't getting takeaways to counter those interceptions, it makes those turnovers by Baker even more glaring, and it makes things a little bit harder for the team to overcome within the confines of a game. Here's my only criticism of this list. since it did span both sides of the ball and all different positions. Where's Lavonte David? Saints linebacker Demario Davis was 29th. Commanders linebacker Bobby Wagner was 12th. But where's Lavonte? Surely he isn't still, at this point in his career, being overlooked when he continuously shows week in and week out that he's one of the best linebackers in the league, arguably one of the best linebackers to ever play this game. And still, no one ever talks about him and what he's doing at age 35. He is going to go out and get you over 100 tackles. He is going to go out and get you double-digit tackles for loss. He's going to get you a couple of takeaways. He's going to get you a couple of sacks. It was a good list by Wasserman. It truly was. But maybe show a little bit of love to the ageless wonder who should certainly be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but hasn't gotten nearly enough attention or accolades to be in the forefront of the minds of those that make those decisions. I realized last year, Lavonte had, his struggles, but those weren't his fault. When he was lining up next to KJ Britt, who was really, really struggling, he was lining up next to JJ Russell, who was struggling. He only got to play with Servassier Dennis a couple of games before Dennis went out for the season. So he was having to compensate for a lack of productivity next to him. But he's still showing up and showing out every single game. He was still the one making a big tackle or making a big play when the Bucs needed it the most. He was still the one getting an interception, getting a sack, getting a forced fumble when the Bucs needed it the most. So he still continues to be overlooked. I wish he had been on this list. But again, I'm not going to knock the list from Wasserman because it was a great list. You can check it out over at PFF. He gave a couple of Bucs their praise. He had them as the number one players at their position on his list. But I still would have liked to have seen Lavonte sitting there. At least, John Gruden had a nice sit-down conversation with Lavonte, and we're going to be talking about that later on this week. But that's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on so you know every time I go live or a new episode is posted, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you are subscribing there. And you can become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.